An attempt to suicide will no longer be treated as a crime. The centre has moved to decriminalize any attempt to take one's own life. The centre has the backing of 18 states and 4 union territories, but some of these states have a word of caution. They've recommended that there are some aspects that just should not be ignored.
Section 309 of the Indian Penal Code, soon to be deleted from the statute book. In a written reply, Minister of State for Home Affairs, Haribhai Chaudhary, informed the Rajya Sabha that 18 states and 4 union territories had supported the recommendations sent to them by the Law Commission. Effectively, this means that anyone who survives a suicide bid would no longer be a criminal in the eyes of law.
I am completely in favor of this amendment. 309, that is attempt to suicide, cannot be made into an offence. This is cruel, this is inhuman.
मेरे हिसाब से 309 को डिक्रिमिनलाइज करना बहुत ज़रूरी एक स्टेप है, लेकिन जो अबेटमेंट का ऑफेंस है उसको क्लैरिटी देना भी बहुत ज़रूरी है.
So this is what happens next. A cabinet note will be prepared and circulated in the Law Ministry, Health Ministry and the states. The amendment will be prepared by the Cabinet Secretariat for approval by the Cabinet. The amendment will be prepared by the Cabinet Secretariat for approval, which will then be ratified by both houses of the Parliament.
The matter had been referred to Law Commission from time to time. You are informing me now that the report has been given in which 18 state governments and many stakeholders have supported the deletion of this section as a criminal section. I do believe that there's a lot of weight and logic in the view that an attempt to suicide, a failed attempt to suicide, should not be a subject matter of criminal prosecution.
Every person deserves a second chance, and Indian Parliament has now taken a decision which will bring solace to a lot of people who want to live a life of dignity. Instead of looking at legal hassles and troublesome life ahead, this is going to give relief to people who want to have a second chance of living life to the fullest. With camera person Vinod, this is Kamaljeet Sandhu in Delhi for Headlines Today.
Decriminalizing attempting to commit suicide was first recommended in 1971. Finally, the government is moving forward, but will this lead to an increase in attempts because there is no fear that the law will come after you if you fail? Or is this actually humane? Do not harass the victim who is anyway emotionally and mentally down. Joining me on this debate is Colin Gonsalves, senior lawyer. Also with me is Seema Hingorani. She's a clinical psychologist and a trauma researcher. Seema Hingorani, does this make the law more humane now?
Hi, Gaurav.
Hi, can you hear me? Does this make the law more humane?
Yeah, Gaurav, can you... Gaurav, I think the happiness is visible on my face. And I'm really happy that if this law really passes, because I think my patients deserve more dignity in life. They're not criminals, they're just traumatic patients, they're victims, they need rehabilitation. They don't need to be behind the jail.
Okay, that's an important point that you're making. Victims need to be rehabilitated, they need counseling, they don't need jail. But Colin Gonsalves, will this lead to an increase in attempts to commit suicide? Because now that fear of law is not there, that if you fail to die, you'll end up in jail.
Well, in a matter of common sense, I would say that I don't think it'll have any effect on the rate of suicides. Although my colleague on the program may be better suited to answer that question, because people who commit suicide are in such darkness and despair, have lost all hope and want to end their lives, and they are hardly at that moment thinking of the consequences of what would happen if they survive, because they've lost everything on the earth and they feel that they have nothing to live for. And so I don't really imagine that it is possible that a person in such a dark mood would even do a calculation of the possibility of surviving and punishment after that. I don't think that's possible at all.
Okay. Now, Colin, is there merit in what the government of Bihar has said? They've said, what about suicide bombers. Now, you've talked about people who are depressed, who are down, who see no future. But what about a suicide bomber? What about a terrorist who fails, or spies, for example, who may try and consume a cyanide pill and survive? Should there be a separate law to deal with such elements?
Look, that falls in the element of criminality where a person is actually attempting to take the life of another person. A person committing suicide, as the Supreme Court noticed in Ratnam's case in 1994, is a person who's not really trying to harm anybody else. And that is why in 1994 the Supreme Court quashed Article 309, Section 309 as unconstitutional. Yes. Saying that a person is not really trying to harm anybody else. So a suicide bomber is actually a person attempting to murder somebody. It's not really the suicide angle which predominates, it's the attempt to murder. So it's an attempt to murder.
That's an important aspect.
Rather than an attempt to commit
Also, the government of Madhya Pradesh, Colin, I'm sorry, before I come to Seema for a moment, I want to come to you on another legal point that the government of Madhya Pradesh raised. Their point was, political activists on a fast unto death, or those who threaten to immolate themselves, police will be weakened to proceed against them because of removal of Article 309 from the statute books.
Yes, of course. I mean, for example, people like Sharmila, who's on her hunger strike for now how many years, you know, it creates an avenue for activists to really take their hunger strike and their protest to a level which was hitherto not available. But I think that is what, in fact, what Mahatma Gandhi stood for when he went on his hunger fast. And I don't think we would advocate that the British should come in and force feed Mahatma Gandhi when he was on hunger strike. If people have such strong beliefs that their lives become unimportant, as in the case of Sharmila, she feels the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is so horrifying that her life is meaningless and she really wants to protest till the end. I think human beings should respect that, the state should respect that, and let things be what they are.
Okay, and this perhaps, Seema, then increases the scope for rehabilitation, because the right to life and liberty under Article 21 of the Constitution perhaps also includes the right to die.
I think what happens is, Gaurav, the mental health in our country is so poor that nobody really bothers for the rehabilitation. The fear of being handed over to the police after attempts to suicide is so high that when I visit patients in the hospital, all I'm trying to do is remove the fear rather than really working on the symptoms. Why did the person attempt at suicide at first place?
Yes. So how does the rehabilitation aspect work? Because, Seema, is there merit in the Delhi government's submission? The earlier Delhi government, they had said it should be mandatory at least to report attempts to commit suicide so that the survivors can then be sent for counseling. Is that the way? Is that very essential?
I think it's very, very vital. I think the report needs to be still done. So the counseling and rehabilitation is mandatory. Because what happens is, if rehabilitation is not mandatory, then the person may have third or the fourth attempts too, you know. So mental health really, Gaurav, needs to step up, and then that's the reason the reporting is very necessary. So I am for it, you know. I feel that reporting needs to be done. The person needs to be put under a professional psychologist or a trauma expert, and then the reporting constantly needs to be done till the person comes out of it. And the person does come out of it if the help is taken, which is in most cases not taken because of the fear. And people are ostracized in our country after attempts to suicide. That's a very sad part of it. Family members, in fact, sometimes don't even support the patient. You know, they've been labeled. So that's really very sad.
Okay. So, Colin, why did it take almost 50 years? Why did it take 43 years to be precise for decriminalizing 309 to be recommended first and for it to actually happen now, or the move to happen now, Colin?
Well, I think the Supreme Court has its own share of, you know...
Okay.
That's to Colin Gonsalves. I'll come to you in a moment.
I think that, yes, I think the Supreme Court has played a very big role in this debate and this delay. The judgment in Ratnam's case came in 1994. which
Yes.
is 2 decades after, the Law Commission report. And Ratnam's case said that this was a cruel and irrational provision and said that it must be struck down. It was 2 or 3 years later where a constitution bench headed by Justice Verma said in 1996 that Ratnam's case was wrongly decided and that 309 is perfectly valid constitutionally speaking. So it was a 5-judge bench of 1996
Yes.
which really caused the problem for all these years.
Yes.
And I think the Supreme Court is to blame for that pretty bad judgment in 96 as opposed to the pretty good judgment in 1994.
Just,
and a 5-judge bench
just
decision
one
stands in your
aspect
way
here,
like
the
a
point
wall.
that was being raised about abetment to suicide. Now, if suicide, attempting to kill yourself is not an offense, will abetment need to be looked at afresh? Colin?
Yes, I think abetment is a totally different ball game altogether, and it has certain nuances. So we'll have to see how Parliament deals with the issue of abetment to commit suicide. But as long as 309 goes, a major impediment in this situation of actually causing a double injury to a person, that you're so
Yes.
full of grief that you try and commit suicide, and then you'll end up in jail, which makes your situation. The doing away of 309 will clear the air considerably.
Okay, so a big smile on Seema Hingorani's face, also being echoed, the view being echoed by Colin Gonsalves. For the moment, thank you very much, both of you, for joining me. So that's one positive step forward, even if it's happened 43 years after it was first recommended.